This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Upgrade your business with Shopify, home of the #1 checkout on the planet. Shop Pay boosts conversions up to 50%, meaning fewer carts going abandoned and more sales going cha-ching. So if you're into growing your business, get a commerce platform that's ready to sell wherever your customers are. Visit shopify.com to upgrade your selling today.
I'm Jack, the founder of Everyday Dose, and I was addicted to Adderall for 20 years. At 25, my blood pressure was getting super high, so I decided to quit cold turkey and started drinking lots of coffee. After 1 to 2 hours of energy, I'd crash. Or if I drink too much because I love the taste of coffee, I'd feel anxious, jittery, and bloated. So I started researching nutrition and functional mushrooms. Everyday Dose combines science-backed ingredients with the highest quality coffee, so you can have your normal coffee routine, but way better. Use code RADIO at checkout for 25% off and get a free starter kit with your first order.
Ryan Reynolds here for, I guess, my 100th Mint commercial. No, don't. I mean, honestly, when I started this, I thought I only have to do like 4 of these. I mean, it's unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month. How are there still people paying 2 or 3 times that much? I'm sorry, I shouldn't be victim blaming here. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/save. Whenever you're ready.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See details.
I'm Jason Pack, and this is Disorder, the podcast where I have a plan to help small business owners create jobs, whereas my opponent only has concepts of a plan about healthcare. Yes, I'm referencing in a lighthearted way the debate of September 10th, the mano-a-mano Harris-Trump slugfest, where, as crazy as you thought Trump might be, as insane as the things that you thought he might say, he went further, and he went further in a disordering vein. He said illegal migrants are eating pets in Springfield. He accused the Biden-Harris administration of ordering transgender operations on illegal aliens. He said that the Biden-Harris administration has wrecked the economy and wrecked the country. But the key thing is that Harris came right back at him, and she painted him as the disorderer that he is. There was a moment where she explained actually what is neopopulism. She explained that the Democrats had a piece of legislation to crack down on illegal migration, but Trump called Senate and congressional Republicans to block it because it would have fixed the problem, and he wanted to be able to run on the problem rather than having it fixed. And she, of course, didn't use the term neopopulist, but she explained that Trump's behavior pattern was disordering, that he created problems for the very reason that he might be able to run on them. And I and many others are very encouraged. I'm not going to come out there and say that as a Harris skeptic, I'm converted. No, of course not. She was very plotting at times. She played identity politics cards. She was slow to get started, but she delivered her lines. She had a smile on her face a lot, and she had some zingers. What I think we need to understand is that she pushed him to take the bait and reveal all his lies and calumny. She didn't do a good job of making herself seem human. She didn't do a good job of saying what a Harris administration stands for. She didn't explain what she would do in Ukraine. She didn't explain on Israel-Palestine or healthcare. She merely gave Trump the bait to self-destruct. So now let's bring in the one, the only, the former British ambassador to Georgia, the Brit who lives in D.C. and is now an American and is in the trenches campaigning in McLean in Virginia. Alex, tell me, how did you perceive how it all went down?
Well, Jason, I'm tempted to say that I now know where all those dogs have gone for all the missing dog posters I see around my neighborhood. It's these awful, evil immigrants from Haiti that are cooking them up in their backyards. I mean, going into the debate, as I know you were too, we were a bit nervous. And Harris blew it away. She just did so much better than I, and I think many, many others were expecting. leading into the debate, she'd been criticized for avoiding media again.
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Upgrade your business with Shopify, home of the #1 checkout on the planet. Shop Pay boosts conversions up to 50%, meaning fewer carts going abandoned and more sales going cha-ching. So if you're into growing your business, get a commerce platform that's ready to sell wherever your customers are. Visit shopify.com to upgrade your selling today.
I'm Jack, the founder of Everyday Dose, and I was addicted to Adderall for 20 years. At 25, my blood pressure was getting super high, so I decided to quit cold turkey and started drinking lots of coffee. After 1 to 2 hours of energy, I'd crash. Or if I drink too much because I love the taste of coffee, I'd feel anxious, jittery, and bloated. So I started researching nutrition and functional mushrooms. Everyday Dose combines science-backed ingredients with the highest quality coffee, so you can have your normal coffee routine, but way better. Use code RADIO at checkout for 25% off and get a free starter kit with your first order.
Mega orderers, wanted to tell you guys about another podcast that I really like, The Jordan Harbinger Show. We're really fortunate to have Jordan as a guest later this year. He is a superstar. His show features in-depth interviews with some of the world's most fascinating minds. And what Jordan brings to the pod is a cool, calm Californian energy, talking about tech regulation, but then also relationships and some self-help advice. He also speaks with some of the most fascinating minds out there, like Jamie Metzel and Bill Browder. It's really a must-listen for any of you mega orderers out there. Search for The Jordan Harbinger Show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Engagements for being vague about policy, for not being a skilled debater or candidate. And she just ate Trump alive. And she succeeded in doing what I haven't seen any other American politician, except possibly Liz Cheney, do, which is actually take the fight to Trump and really challenge him on all the flaws that we know about. I mean, she just hammered him on his fitness for office, on his readiness to serve, his record, his manifold lies. And one of the things I think she was really skillful about is she kneecapped him right at the outset by saying, I just want everyone out there to know that in this debate, we are going to see Donald Trump resort to his usual litany of name-calling, grievances, and lies. And it was so brilliant because then when he did start coming out with all these insults and lies, she was able to see, and there you are. That's what I told you would happen. So I think she aced it.
For sure. And all the media is saying she eviscerated him. I think it's critical to point out to the mega orderers, Fox News and the Wall Street Journal editorial point out that Harris won the debate. I just bought the New York Post, which is essentially the American equivalent of the Daily Mail. It's a right-wing, populist, culture-war-y outfit. It essentially said Harris won the debate, but then they have because the ABC moderators ganged up on Trump and they unfairly fact-checked and whatever, but they can't spin away from the fact that he lost the debate. So I think that's really critical to throw out there for us to try to order the disorder, which is that this was such a seminal moment, and it differs in quality from the quote-unquote 2016 Hillary victory in the debate over Trump, where it was like, well, maybe it was 55-45. No, when they went to the undecided voters in Pennsylvania, it was 2/3 that thought that Harris had won the debate. What that will mean and whether it gets over her issues with white men that we spoke about, we don't know the answer to that. But I want to focus on 2 or 3 things that you said there, that she was on the attack. Trump does a thing which is called gish galloping, and we're going to put a link in the show notes to explain what gish galloping is. Mehdi Hasan, who was a Guardian columnist, has written a whole book about the nature of how to win arguments in debates, and he has a chapter on gish galloping. It's where if you're asked about what are you going to do to improve healthcare, you say, my opponent raised inflations and all these illegal aliens that are coming in and the transgender. And it's that you don't respond to the question and you just bulldoze and stampede over the opponent. I would argue that when Biden was forced to drop out, it was because he was gish galloped. And then when Hillary lost, it was again because she didn't really respond to the gish galloping. Somehow, Harris very much turned that around and attacked Trump. The New York Times used AI to determine the number of minutes whereby Harris or Trump were seen as on offense. Trump spoke for 43 minutes and Harris only for 38, yet 17 of her minutes were on offense and only 13 of Trump's minutes were seen as on offense, whereas no one, going all the way back to Marco Rubio and Jeb, in all of the debates from the 2016 primary to the 2016 and 2020 presidential, no one was on offense more than Trump. In other words, everyone else was gish-galloped and bulldozed. Somehow, despite her weaknesses, which we're going to come to, in the core thing, which was to prosecute the case against Trump, to make it clear that he's a ridiculous buffoon who believes these absurd things and thinks that Orban is highly respected and that it's best that the Ukrainians don't win and all of that, she responded to the gish galloping. She went on offense. Trump had to double down and then made himself more ridiculously absurd as his claims veered off into absurdistan of MAGA conspiratorial insanity.
Yeah, no, I would say there were three things that she did really well in terms of the style of the debate. One was the one that you pointed out, that every question that was probing at something that's a potential weakness for her, she used it, turned it around to make it a question about Trump. The second thing she did is, as you pointed out, she didn't actually speak as much as Trump. The more he went off on these long screeds, the more able she was just to sit back and let these absurdities play themselves out for everybody to see. And thirdly, she never wasted time defending herself. When he made some wild claim, she let it land. And then she didn't sort of respond and get all defensive and say, actually, that's not true. I didn't do that. I didn't do this. She used it to make a different point. So there was a very skillful moment where the questioners asked Trump about his assertions that Kamala Harris had only recently become black, like it's a kind of choice, your ethnicity. And Harris didn't use that comment to say, this is just such a sign of a personal attack on me. She said, this is just another example of the history of racism that Donald Trump has, like his discrimination against black families looking for housing in his properties in New York, like his full-page ads calling for the death penalty for the Central Park Five. She twisted it around. She didn't make it about herself. She made it about him.
Exactly. We say that game playing can give you insight into politics. And one of the things that everyone who's married or been in a relationship knows is winning an argument on the merits of what you have to say is not the best way to get your case across. Sometimes it's to listen to the other person and then to point out the hypocrisy in what they've done. So she was psychologically attuned rather than the more Hillary approach, which I feared would happen, of just trying to be like, no, but in the 1997 bill, we passed this and that inflation thing. She didn't fall for that.
Yeah, and then I think there were two other aspects of her style that I thought were quite skillful, although one potentially could be picked up and turned against her, which is that her body language and her posture, by and large, remained very composed. She was smiling. And when Trump came out with sort of ludicrous assertions like immigrants are eating cats and dogs, she just sort of kind of smiled and looked sort of disbelieving and sort of incredulous. There is a bit of a risk in that some people might spin that as her sort of smirking or being condescending or superior. So it's a little bit of a risk. But most of the time, I thought she managed to remain composed and not look too sort of snooty or superior. And then the other thing is I studied classics at school, and I read the Latin version of Cicero's prosecution of a corrupt Sicilian magistrate known as Verres. And he used a rhetorical device where he would say, and I need not mention Verres' role in selling this, and I need not mention his degradation, his corruption, his abuse of this, or his perversion of that. No, the real issue. And this is a device called praeteritio in classical oratory, where you allude to things while pretending you're not actually alluding to them. And she was very, very skilled in using similar rhetorical devices. And the one that really stood out for me, which was a classic prosecutor technique, was when she repeated, "It's well known that, it's well known that, it's well known that, it's well known that he called on Putin to say he could do whatever he liked. It's well known that he called Kim Jong-un a friend. It's well known." And by putting it in such repetitive terms, it sort of had momentum. But also the choice of words was very good because it is well known. It kind of was irrefutable. It wasn't an allegation. It wasn't an alternative fact. It just was sort of stated. It was excellent.
I think that the debate will be studied for the ways to take down a neopopulist. And we started the episode with the fact that she essentially called him a neopopulist, someone who exacerbates a problem rather than trying to solve it. And the media hasn't really picked up on that moment about immigration, but I think it was one of the key conceptual things in terms of the kind of issues that orderers and disorderers are concerned with. There are a lot of podcasts out there about who said what in this debate, and Scaramucci explaining how she's pivoted to the center, and Alistair and Rory saying that she could have landed more blows, and the 538 explaining how this would move the polls. I'd like us to do something different, Alex. Let's go through the different issue areas and talk about how, in a way, the debate was a struggle between order and disorder, and how Harris and Trump put forth their case. I think the key one to start with is immigration. And for British listeners, I think if you watch the debate or have been hearing the spin coverage of it, this is the issue that is the most similar between British politics in the 2024 July 4 general election and the US November 2024 election, is that anxiety about migrants is at an absolute fever pitch. How did you see this issue playing out, Alex?
All right, so this was another classic example of her turning a potential vulnerability back into a judgment on Trump, because absolutely there are question marks about the administration's handling of immigration, where for the first 3 years of the Biden administration, there was a massive influx of immigrants over the border. But first of all, she needled Trump by throwing in comments about his rally size that immediately threw him off course. And then she made the point that actually, when there was a serious, months-long bipartisan effort to craft a bill to enhance border security, he nixed it because he's more interested in running on the problem than trying to fix it. So that was a classic example. And actually, throughout the debate, I would say, if I was being critical, and we can come on to that yes, she did kind of wriggle out of explaining more of her own policies because she was so focused on deflecting and putting it on him. But I think that's what she needed to win the debate, because she's coming under a lot of scrutiny right now. What's been absolutely astonishing about the race so far is how little scrutiny is being given to Trump. It's kind of baked in.
Yes, that's right. She is going to put the onus on Trump, and the media is going to be forced to scrutinize him, even right-leaning media. But back to immigration, I think that there was a Brexit Reform Party kind of narrative that Trump was playing. The migrants are stealing your jobs. The reason healthcare is bad is because the migrants are taking the services. Somehow, rather than landing the arguments on the cost of living, which he might have been successful with, he got pushed into the migrants are eating your pets, rather than that they're preventing you from getting your hospital appointments. And this bit pushed him so far. He then went to his Biden and Harris are deliberately ruining America. They're letting criminals in, so much so that crime has decreased everywhere from Latin America to the Middle East, because all the criminals from there have been released to come to America, and that's why crime is high in America. And the moderators had to say, over the last 4 years, crime has decreased in America. And I think that this is critical because immigration, to my mind, and cost of living are one issue, and it's the most important issue in the campaign. And Trump could have landed a lot of blows there, but he got, as it were, distracted and forced into the more extremes of gish galloping. So I think that this issue area is going to be the most important one in the ads and in the, memes on Twitter and stuff. But it was not a resounding success for Trump, even if the electorate might be leaning towards his position.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. The mistake he made was just going for sort of ludicrous hyperbole. There is a case to be made about immigration, but because he came out with these wild assertions and then, America's a disaster, we're declining, crime is going down around the world, other countries are emptying their lunatic asylums and deliberately sending them to us. And then they're getting gender reassignment surgery. I mean, he just went sort of too far. So he just failed to land the points because it just sounded like so much nonsense.
Alex, as a suburban Lib Dem mom, how many lunatics from Venezuela have you personally invited into the country to perform gender reassignment surgery on them?
I don't know. I think they're too busy stealing dogs and cats. I'm not.
I try for 20 a day. Do you know, to be a Starmer centrist dad, I try to host at my house at least 20 Venezuelan lunatics per day and do gender assignment surgery. When I'm not on the pod, it's mostly what I'm doing with my time.
I mean, I'm totally worried that, my two boys are going to go to school and come back as girls in the evening because America's evil public school is going to indoctrinate them and then it's going to perform gender reassignment surgery. And my little boy is going to come back as Joanna. I mean, some of the die-hard MAGA supporters, they're just going to love him no matter what. But the issue is about the undecided. And I just have to believe, we could talk about to what extent this really moves the dial, but I have to believe that for a lot of undecideds, they may still not wholly be on board for the Democrat agenda, but at least Kamala consistently tried to reach out to the middle, tried to talk about you, tried to explain how she was there for all Americans. And Trump just went further and further and further down his conspiracy rabbit holes. So I have to believe that people in the middle, if they're going to be moved, I have to believe more of them are going to move her way.
So if we're talking about the moving the dial part of this discussion, I think it's critical to talk about the Taylor Swift endorsement. I had Taylor Swift as a thing that we were going to need to discuss even before the endorsement came out because she didn't appear at the DNC. She's appeared to be fence-sitting. Brittany Mahomes, the wife of Patrick Mahomes, the top quarterback in the NFL, who's the two-time Super Bowl defending champ, tweeted something in support of Trump that she later withdrew. But there is a thought that Brittany Mahomes is a Trump supporter and that Taylor Swift was seen with her at the U.S. Open on Sunday and hasn't done blah, 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 blah. The internet has been a tizzy about these Taylor Swift issues. And the fact that the Taylor Swift endorsement came out not only on the day of the debate, but during the debate, so that the spin room coverage was dominated by it, it may be difficult for non-Americans or people over the age of 40 to grasp truly how significant this is, because there are two things going on here. There's winning over undecideds, but there aren't many of those, and getting the base or people who lean your way but tend not to vote out. And for the Dems, this is going to be younger voters and minority voters. For younger female voters, the one person who can most speak to them is this woman, Taylor Swift. She timed this to a T. She used the childless cat lady meme. She explained a range of issues as to why support for Harris is critical. And it is not an exaggeration to say that this could swing 100 or more thousand votes and could lead to 200,000 or 300,000 people voting who might not otherwise. So that may end up being the biggest implication of the debate.
Well, I certainly hope it has that effect. I don't think it's a secret about which side we want to win in this election. I quite like Taylor Swift. And one of the things I really admired about how she endorsed the Harris-Walz ticket was actually it was a kind of a very mature intervention. It just said, this is a critical election. I've done my research, I've looked into the issues, and based on my assessment, I'm going to be supporting this ticket. And then she said, it's your job to do your research and to look into the issues, and it's for you to make your choice. So she was quite respectful, but it was a very carefully drafted intervention.
So now to zoom out from the Taylor Swift thing, other things about impact.
Issues. How about the issues? Are there any other issues?
We're talking about impact, and these are all about impact. Fracking. I think that the fracking issue may be one where Trump landed points. Of course, he's wrong. She's not going to ban fracking on day one, and she can't just ban fracking in Pennsylvania because that's not how the United States works. We have Congress, we have Supreme Court, we have checks and balances, we have the role of the states. But it is true that she's flip-flopped on fracking, and that fracking is very popular in Pennsylvania and seen as key for Western Pennsylvania's economy. So I want to start out by conceding that although everything she said was completely reasonable and all of the Trump attacks were completely unreasonable, this might have been an issue where he will have been seen to land points, and that there are some voters, particularly those in the oil and gas industry in Western Pennsylvania, for whom it's a one-issue election.
Yeah, and a lot of commentators are saying that of all the swing states, the 7 swing states, Pennsylvania seems to be the most important. So if he did succeed in landing on her on fracking, since this election may hinge on a few thousand votes in a few small counties, that may have been a telling one.
Yes, and I think it's important for us, because we know where our allegiances lie, and so do the listeners, to say the things that Trump may have landed on. I think another one where he landed was the debate about his tariffs in China, because Harris tried to say that they are taxes, that essentially Trump is going to raise taxes on consumables. She was not clear. This was at the start of the debate, and she started slow. I was very worried. I had that feeling in my gut. I needed to pretend to be religious and pray before it started.
I just had a lot of wine before it started.
Yeah, I had some Saperavi, get the juices flowing for the Georgian swing state vibe. But I think that she started slow, and she didn't explain the way in which taxes on Chinese imports would be a tax on consumers. And when he said it's not a tax, you guys in the Biden-Harris administration kept my taxes because they netted so much revenue from China and they're being used for government spending. The left-wing media isn't covering that because he landed something there. And again, he's completely wrong. The tariffs on China are a horrible tax on consumers and will even hurt our producers who use Chinese and foreign components to re-export products. But we've got to call a spade a spade. He landed blows there. No, Alex?
Yes, so I thought her commentary, her very first answer on the economy was her weakest. And she came across as nervous and hesitant. And she spoke very fast. And the question was quite direct. Could you say that Americans are better off than they were 4 years ago? And she immediately sidetracked it. So you just felt, because she couldn't say that. Because, unfortunately, the cost of living for average middle-class Americans has really gone up. And a lot of Americans are really hurting. And I have anecdotal evidence of this. I mean, just talking to people who were working on my house recently, every single one of them said, we're just really struggling. Things were better off. Things were better when Trump was in power. The economy was better. And it's the economy, the economy, the economy. And again, Trump's mistake in this debate, and I'm sure his campaign managers were just tearing their hair out, is he's just not able to stay disciplined. What I was worried about in her answer, again, I just had that frisson of nervousness that you talked about. Her answer got too deep into sort of complicated policy issues. And that wasn't what the debate called for. And it reminded me of Hillary Clinton. And the reason she got better as the debate went on is, first of all, she was very lucky. She got a question fairly on about abortion, where she was immediately able to turn it around.
Let's pivot to that abortion question, Alex. So the media is saying that this is actually her brightest hour of everything. CNN cut after the debate to the Erie County, Western Pennsylvania watch party, where both Republicans and independents, and certainly Democrats, showcased that they had the most positive emotion for her when she was explaining I want to give women their own freedom, and I want to get the government out of their bodies. And apparently that is a focus group tested line. It was completely a prepared line. I thought it was rigid and absurd, but it's been focus group to death, saying, I support the freedom of every woman to handle her own body, get the government out of their body. That works.
This is a real issue. And so just like the cost of living is a real issue, that's something that all households can relate to. They can tell if their shopping budget has gone up when they go to the supermarket. This issue about abortion and women's health, it is something that you feel really viscerally. In this state of Virginia, where I live, the local state government passed a law allowing the police to gain access to medical records to find out which women have had miscarriages and to find out which households are buying abortion drugs. That is massively intrusive. And I think it's not just a female issue. I mean, men care about this stuff too.
I couldn't be more pro-choice, Alex. It's just the way of explaining it, because government is going to decide what kind of operations are legal and not legal, which drugs the FDA approves or doesn't approve. I couldn't agree more with her on the policy. And of course, I would like Roe v. Wade to be the law of the land. It's this interesting default to get the government out of my health care.
Yeah, but I think that's a very clever line because it's
clever only because of the American insistence that government is bad.
Yeah,
I want
exactly.
the government in my healthcare protecting the woman's right to choose. I want the government funding the opportunities for people to have those IVFs. Again, it's a question of framing. It landed, but it's very interesting about the American psychology because it is based on a lie. It's not really a question of getting government out of your body, but that's what lands and has been focus grouped to death and works.
I absolutely love that line because it's stealing a Republican line that they're all about small government and using it back on them. And I'm not going to criticize the Harris campaign for coming up with a line that works. Good on them. It's great.
Okay.
I liked her on foreign policy. I thought...
Okay, foreign policy.
As a former diplomat and somebody who really, really cares about democracy, human rights, standing up for values, standing up for our alliances, her comments on foreign policy were absolutely great. I mean, she sounded like John McCain. I felt like I was listening to Senator John McCain or Ronald Reagan. Strong military. We need a president who understands America's duties and responsibilities in the world. Ukraine is engaged in a righteous defense, and he is cozying up to dictators who know that they can manipulate him with flattery and favors. It was like boom, boom, boom. And then he was asked, did he want Ukraine to win? And he couldn't say that. And then when she said, other world leaders are laughing at you, he said, that's just ridiculous. I mean, Viktor Orban, this great guy, they say he's a strong man, but he's a really great guy. He thinks I'm great. I'm the best ever. And it's like, really? You're citing Viktor Orban? I mean, the problem is, will voters across the country understand the significance of him calling on his defense, a kind of authoritarian leader? I don't know.
I think that they will. A lot of the Trump points are deliberately MAGA memes, Alex. I agree with everything that Harris said on the foreign policy part of the debate. Some of it was overly focus grouped for me. In other words, it was deliberately this pivot to the center that some people will attack her on as being too rigidly constructed. But every policy that she said on China and Ukraine and Taiwan and Israel-Palestine and Palestinian self-determination and the need to support Israel in self-defense, but to not, have Palestinian debts and to have Palestinian sovereignty, all of it was perfect. 100% perfect. I don't know if it landed, but I want to give a larger framing here. I am wearing my New York Rangers shirt purchased from their 1994 Stanley Cup victory. It's the sports team that plays closest to the Twin Towers. And today is 23 years since the 9/11 happened. It's the day that changed everything about my life. It changed everything about foreign policy and America's role in the world, for the good and the bad. Little could we have possibly thought that 20 years after the Iraq War was launched, the Democratic presidential candidate would be bragging about getting Dick Cheney's endorsement and not saying, but I disagree with him on this, this, and this. I think this brings us full circle since 9/11. And that's why I'm wearing my Rangers shirt. And we're going to have a clip for the Substack. So please join the Substack by following the link in the show notes. Because the issues have really come around where now America is on the back foot. Our presence in the world is far weakened, and Americans do want us to engage more in the world and in a consensus way with our allies. So Trump's isolationism is no longer popular. And I think that she was able to bring this all full circle. I wish that she had invoked the 9/11 because they met there again today and they actually shook hands at the 9/11 memorial. And you can see how maybe one period of world history is coming to an end. And when the history books are written, September 10th, 2024 could be this moment where a very dangerous over-interventionist strain of American policy ended, a very dangerous pro-authoritarian, pro-isolationist strain of foreign policy was checked, and we then squared the difference between neocons and liberal interventionists, and regular American foreign policy was brought back together, and Dems and Repubs from a normal bit united, and that could happen under the Harris-Waltz ticket. So I see a whole historic cycle having been brought to fruition.
I'm interested that you're saying that most Americans support American engagement in the world.
They do. This is a polled question.
Okay, that is very good to hear. I think perhaps then, if that is the case, then what Americans are unhappy about is if they feel American leadership is not effective, if there's not a real strategy. So provided you can lay out a convincing case, not just for why we're supporting Ukraine, but that we have a strategy to win, Americans will still follow. They don't want to abandon NATO. They do understand that we are entering a new and dangerous world. So there is a strain of thought amongst some quarters in America that this is all too messy. We don't want to get dragged in these forever wars. The Europeans aren't doing enough. So Donald Trump is speaking to them. It's good if the polls are indicating that most Americans nevertheless still understand and support this leadership role of America in the world. But I would say the critique of the Harris-Biden administration that many of my Republican friends would have